𝐂𝐤𝐒 used to be a valiant knight who met his end at the hands of the demons. However, after his death, he was reborn into the body of an S-rank behemoth, a creature so powerful it could obliterate entire nations in an instant. In reality, he merely appears as a cat. While 𝐂𝐤𝐒 is grateful for this second chance at life, he feels a bit torn about his new form as a monster. At that moment, he spots an E-rank slime slowly approaching him. Reacting quickly, he unlocks an ability that allows him to fire rocks from his mouth and uses it to defeat the slime. Once the threat is eliminated, he realizes he hasn't eaten anything since his reincarnation, so he decides to give the slime a try. To his surprise, he discovers he can absorb the skills of monsters he consumes. This leads to him unlocking the ability to store items. After that, 𝐂𝐤𝐒 decides to go through the rest of the dungeon to see what else he can eat. Since he's an S rank, none of the other monsters really stand a chance against him. 𝐂𝐤𝐒 proceeds to slay all kinds of minotaurs, golems, and snakes to feed on them. And so far, his life as a cat hasn't been so bad. At the same time, the elf girl has just arrived at the dungeon entrance to begin her day of adventuring. Back with 𝐂𝐤𝐒, he's still busy exploring his new home when he comes across a treasure chest in the middle of the room. He's really excited since this is the first time he has ever seen a treasure chest in person, so he rushes to open it and finds a massive gem inside. Unfortunately, the treasure chest turned out to be a trap, but instead of being a mimic, it teleports him into a hidden boss room. 𝐂𝐤𝐒 finds himself riding on the back of an earth dragon, and unlike the other monsters he's faced so far, this one is also S rank like him, meaning he won't be able to take it down in a single blow like the others. The earth dragon taunts 𝐂𝐤𝐒 for daring to enter her lair, declaring that she's going to kill him. However, 𝐂𝐤𝐒 has only been alive for an hour, and he's not about to let himself be taken out so easily. He tries using his rock attack, but because the earth dragon is, well, made of earth, the attack harmlessly bounces off her back and strikes the roof, leaving a small hole. The dragon retaliates with a slash, but 𝐂𝐤𝐒 counters it by activating his iron body skill to shield himself. Although 𝐂𝐤𝐒 manages to withstand the slash, the attack leaves him seriously injured. The dragon, impressed that he's still alive after enduring one of her strikes, acknowledges his resilience, but notes that he remains too weak to defeat her. She charges forward, intending to finish him off. At the last moment, however, 𝐂𝐤𝐒 activates a flight skill and uses his tail to slash out the dragon's eye before escaping through the hole in the ceiling. 𝐂𝐤𝐒 is losing a lot of blood from his injuries, so he's trying to get out of the dungeon to find a safe place to rest before he ends up passing out. He's right next to the exit, but he eventually succumbs to the blood loss and collapses to the ground. Just then, he notices something approaching from around the corner, and since he can't move anymore, whatever that thing is will definitely be able to kill him once he is spotted. Luckily for him, it was the elf girl who came around the corner. As soon as she saw the near lifeless body of a cat, she rushed over to help him. 𝐂𝐤𝐒 wakes up a few hours later to find himself lying in bed with his wounds carefully bandaged. Feeling disoriented, he wonders where he might be, but his confusion is interrupted when an elf girl enters the room holding a bowl of milk for him. He recalls catching a glimpse of her just before passing out and can't help but marvel at her beauty. The elf girl is visibly relieved to see 𝐂𝐤𝐒 awake, noting that his injuries were quite severe. She admits she has no idea how a little kitten like him could have ended up in the middle of a dungeon. 𝐂𝐤𝐒 quickly realizes that she believes he's just an ordinary cat rather than the powerful behemoth he truly is. Since he can't speak, there's no way to explain the truth. But even if he could, why would he ruin the arrangement when it means getting to sleep on her chest every night? Over the next few weeks, the elf girl continues to take care of 𝐂𝐤𝐒 until he has fully recovered from his wounds. One day, Aria heads out as usual, and while she's gone, 𝐂𝐤𝐒 thinks about how grateful he is for what she has done for him. She not only nursed him back to health, but she also gave him food to eat and let him sleep in her bed. In order to pay her back for her kindness, 𝐂𝐤𝐒 swears that no matter what happens, he's going to make sure he protects that girl with his life. To ensure her safety, 𝐂𝐤𝐒 decides to follow Aria into the dungeon so he can keep an eye on her. He sneaks onto the boat before it leaves. Once they get to the dungeon, He begins quietly following Area while staying hidden. He's a bit worried that she might get herself into some kind of weird situation, like losing her clothes to a slime or something, so he prepares himself to jump in at the first sign of trouble. As Area encounters a group of goblins, she swiftly activates her acceleration skill, cutting them down with ease. Once the fight is over, she kneels to collect their ears, intending to claim the reward later. Watching her in action, 𝐃𝐈 is thoroughly impressed. With his past experience as a knight, he knows a great deal about swordsmanship and can easily recognize just how incredible Area's speed and technique are. As Area finishes stowing the goblin ears, she spots another goblin peering at her from behind a corner. Instinctively, she assumes her battle stance. She's already killed enough goblins to meet her quota for the day, but if this one insists on attacking, she's ready to take it down too. What she doesn't realize, however, is that this goblin isn't ordinary, it's a goblin mage. Without warning, it hurls a massive fireball in her direction. Caught off guard and unprepared to handle such an attack, Area finds herself in serious trouble. 𝐃𝐈 doesn't want to let her get hurt, but he can't use any of his overpowered skills without revealing that he's a monster. Instead, he pushes Area out of the way and slashes the goblin mage with his regular kitty paws, causing it to stumble backward and fall down the dungeon stairs to its doom. Area doesn't understand why or how 𝐃𝐈 managed to get here, but she's grateful that he saved her. On the ride back to town, she lets him lay on her triple Ds while she tickles his belly, and 𝐃𝐈 is absolutely loving it. After returning to town, Area heads straight to the Adventurers Guild to submit the goblin ears she collected. As she approaches the reception desk, she is intercepted by Lord 𝐂𝐸𝐿. Though she has encountered him before, she had been trying to steer clear of him because of his persistent attempts to recruit her into his party. Area tries to politely decline his offer, fully aware of 𝐂𝐸𝐿's sleazy nature, but he refuses to accept her rejection. As if to push his luck, he reaches out to grab both of her cheeks. Before his hands can make contact, 𝐃𝐈 springs into action, biting down hard on 𝐂𝐸𝐿's hand and refusing to let go. 𝐂𝐸𝐿 yells in pain, flailing wildly in an attempt to shake 𝐃𝐈 loose. When he finally manages to dislodge the furious kitten, 𝐃𝐈 lands directly on 𝐂𝐸𝐿's face and unleashes a flurry of scratches before leaping back onto Area's chest, leaving 𝐂𝐸𝐿 thoroughly humiliated. 𝐂𝐸𝐿 is enraged and is about to draw his sword to attack 𝐃𝐈, but before he could take a swing, his sword is grabbed by the guild master, Arnold. Arnold reminds 𝐂𝐸𝐿 that the guild has rules against brandishing weapons, especially when it's for a reason as pathetic as beefing with a cat. So there are going to be major consequences for him if he continues. 𝐂𝐸𝐿 doesn't want to mess with Arnold, so he immediately runs out the door. Area begins thanking Arnold for helping her out. He tells her it's no big deal and compliments 𝐃𝐈 for sticking up for Area when he bit 𝐂𝐸𝐿's hand. Area then heads to the reception desk, and Arnold documents all monster parts to officially complete Area's quest. Afterwards, Area takes a seat at one of the tables, so she can spend some quality time with 𝐃𝐈. Up to this point, everything has been fairly wholesome, but Area is starting to exhibit some odd behavior. While she's tickling 𝐃𝐈's stomach, her finger begins to stray dangerously close to his balls, and she seems a bit too thrilled about the idea of tickling her cat's private area. Shortly after, Area prepares to take a bath and decides to bring 𝐃𝐈 along with her. However, 𝐃𝐈, being a former knight with his honor to uphold, refuses to engage in something as improper as joining her in the women's bath. Despite his protests, 𝐃𝐈 ultimately finds himself in the bath with Area. While they're there, Area starts talking about her aspiration to become stronger. She shares how, years ago, demons nearly wiped out her village, but the sword Saint Alicia arrived just in time, defeating the demons and saving everyone. Since then, Area has been determined to grow strong like Alicia. The next day, Area is heading to the guild with 𝐃𝐈 again, and 𝐃𝐈 can tell that she's well liked by everyone in town since they are all so nice to her. She makes it to the guild and greets Arnold at the reception desk, but Arnold tells her that today isn't a good day to be here, so she should get out of here quickly. Unfortunately, before Area could follow Arnold's advice, 𝐂𝐸𝐿 shows up and proudly announces that after he got injured by her cat, he went and tattled to the Baron. As a result, he was given a special order saying that Area's pet cat is to be put down. Area is in utter disbelief at what she's hearing. Although she hasn't had Tama for very long, he's incredibly precious to her, and the thought of him being killed is unbearable. She drops to her knees, pleading with 𝐂𝐸𝐿 to show mercy. Sensing her desperation, 𝐂𝐸𝐿 decides to exploit the situation to his advantage. He suggests they have a duel. If Area wins, Tama's life will be spared, but if 𝐂𝐸𝐿 wins, she must agree to become his wife. The deal is blatantly unfair, especially since 𝐂𝐸𝐿 holds a higher rank than Area. But with Tama's life on the line, Area has no choice but to accept the terms. The duel begins, and 𝐂𝐸𝐿 kicks her in the side. After she stumbles, he compliments Area on her speed, but says that it won't be enough for her to beat him. Area tries to switch tactics and throws several daggers at him, but 𝐂𝐸𝐿 has a knife-proof cape, so he is easily able to block. He then charges at Area and begins putting pressure on her by repeatedly striking with his sword until he eventually disarms her. Now, all hope is pretty much lost for Area since she can no longer defend herself. Tama is feeling deeply torn at this moment. If he doesn't do anything, Area will be forced into marrying 𝐂𝐸𝐿. However, if he uses any of his abilities, the onlookers will realize he's actually a monster. As 𝐂𝐸𝐿 moves in to deliver the final strike and make Area surrender, Tama decides he can't stand by any longer. He leaps in to protect Area, activating his iron body skill to shatter 𝐂𝐸𝐿's blade. Immediately after, Tama unleashes a powerful howl skill, sending 𝐂𝐸𝐿 hurtling into a cluster of nearby trees. By sheer coincidence, 𝐂𝐸𝐿's sword is flung in the same direction aimed directly at his balls, ensuring he's about to have an extremely unpleasant experience. After what just happened, everyone in the crowd begins murmuring amongst themselves because they know they just saw the cat use skills. Tama knew this would happen, and now that everyone has seen him use skills, it won't be long before they figure out that he's a monster. He knows he'll definitely be killed, but even so, he's satisfied with this outcome because he at least managed to defend Area. Area and Arnold approach Tama, and after witnessing him use his skills, they begin discussing what he might actually be, rather than concluding that Tama is a monster. They are convinced that he must be an elemental cat. Arnold announces Area as the winner, and everything returns to normal, allowing Tama to carry on his life as an overpowered cat with the coziest bed imaginable. The next morning, Area tries to coax Tama out of bed by cuddling him, but the mischievous kitten playfully nibbles on her ear, leaving her completely flustered and blushing uncontrollably. Remembering his past life as an honorable knight, Tama quickly decides to stop before the situation becomes even more awkward. He leaps off the bed to walk away, but Area keeps calling after him, her tone full of longing, which only makes things even more uncomfortable for Tama. Later, Area brings Tama to the blacksmith shop to visit her friend Vulcan. As soon as they arrive, Vulcan's attention is immediately captured by Tama, her eyes fixed on the adorable kitten. While Area shares stories about Tama, Vulcan eagerly asks if she can hold him. Tama seems delighted as Vulcan picks him up, marveling at his cuteness. However, Area quickly redirects the conversation to the purpose of their visit. She needs Vulcan to craft armor for Tama. Vulcan is thrilled by the idea, excited to take on such a unique and charming project. She immediately starts taking Tama's measurements, assuring Area that she'll create the perfect armor for him. As Vulcan gets busy with her work, Area leans down to whisper to Tama, asking if he's ready for an adventure. Without hesitation, Tama eagerly agrees. While Area and Tama make their plans, Vulcan is laser focused on crafting the armor, treating the task like it's her life's mission. In just under 10 minutes, Vulcan proudly presents the completed armor, and it turns out to be a masterpiece. Tama looks dashing in it, and the fit is perfect. However, Vulcan admits she's still struggling with another issue: Area's sword. Despite reforging it over 100 times, she hasn't been able to make it any lighter, which makes it difficult for Area to wield effectively during her quests. After some thought, Vulcan suggests forming a temporary party. That day, the team dives into the dungeon, where Vulcan quickly demonstrates her strength, smashing through the hideous goblins they encounter. Area watches in awe, completely captivated by Vulcan's boldness and incredible power. Vulcan's expertise is further demonstrated when she deflects a fireball attack from one of the monsters using a special ability linked to her smithing talents. She explains that her power allows her to imbue her armor with various elemental attributes, making her highly adaptable in battle. With the path now clear, Vulcan steps aside and urges Area to take the lead with her sword. Their next challenge is an unsightly, oversized orc. The creature's grotesque appearance is both repulsive and intimidating, but Area charges in regardless. Activating her acceleration skill, she attempts to land a strike, but the orc proves to be surprisingly agile, expertly blocking her attacks. 𝐂𝐤𝐸 then steps in, soaring through the air and activating his iron body technique to shield Area from an incoming blow. Distracting the orc just long enough, seizing the moment, Area strikes and eliminates the beast in a single decisive attack. Vulcan observes Aria's movements closely and notices her long sword hinders her flow in battle, making her strikes less effective. Unhappy with her performance, Aria turns to Vulcan and requests an even tougher challenge, eager to push her boundaries and become stronger. Impressed by her determination, Vulcan encourages her to proceed to the next floor, promising even more formidable trials ahead. As they descend further, the group finds themselves facing a swarm of slimy, lecherous ropers rather than the usual massive beasts. 𝐂𝐤𝐸 immediately grows nervous, worried that these slimy creatures will ensnare his mistress with their writhing tendrils. He quickly warns Aria to stay alert and avoid their sticky grips at all costs. Aria charges in with acceleration, but the ropers' speed makes them tough opponents. Her strikes fail to connect with their bodies, and one of the ropers shatters her heavy sword, leaving her defenseless. Just as she's about to be snared, Vulcan hurls a knife toward her. Aria catches it midair and swiftly drives it into the roper's core, killing it in one precise motion. With newfound resolve, Aria shifts her focus and moves to take down the next slime. As Vulcan watches her fighting style closely, she quickly realizes that Aria's true strength lies in using shorter, lighter weapons rather than her heavy longsword. In a matter of moments, Aria slices through the monster's limbs with incredible speed and precision, leaving Vulcan utterly speechless. Though she always knew Aria was talented, Vulcan hadn't anticipated this level of swiftness and effectiveness in dispatching the second monster. Just as they begin to think the fight is over, the slime splashes its goo all over Aria, completely drenching her from head to toe while regrowing its limbs. Cringing in disgust and fury, Aria growls that only 𝐂𝐤𝐸 is allowed to do something like that to her. Fueled by her outrage, she obliterates the creature in a single devastating move. This time, she cuts it into so many pieces that there's no chance of it regenerating. Vulcan and 𝐂𝐤𝐸 rush to congratulate her on her incredible display of skill. While Vulcan moves closer to offer praise, 𝐂𝐤𝐸, being the cheeky little kitten he is, stops halfway to steal a bit of juice from the dead monster to absorb its skill for his own use. Still fuming, Aria unleashes her frustration on the remnants of the roper that dared to drench her in its disgusting goo. She furiously stabs its already destroyed body over and over, muttering vengeful thoughts under her breath, while 𝐂𝐤𝐸 watches in silent bewilderment, wondering if she might be taking things a bit too far. After her rampage, Aria opens up to Vulcan and shares the story behind her choice to wield longswords. She recounts meeting the Sword Saint during her childhood, a figure who became her idol and inspired her to take up the weapon. Even though the longsword doesn't naturally suit her fighting style, Aria devoted years to mastering it in an effort to follow in her hero's footsteps. However, with her recent realization that daggers complement her skills far better, she has decided to embrace this newfound strength. 𝐂𝐤𝐸 listens attentively and offers his support, reassuring her that this change will only make her stronger. Recognizing Aria's growth, Vulcan suggests venturing to a deeper floor of the dungeon, trusting in Aria's ability to handle the challenges with her daggers. Before pressing on, they decide to rest near a Philosopher's Stone, a rare artifact that keeps monsters at bay within its vicinity. As they take a break, Aria finds herself staring at the stone, which unexpectedly triggers a flood of painful memories from her childhood when her home was attacked by demons. Lost in thought, Aria barely notices Vulcan's concerned look. When Vulcan gently asks if something is wrong, Aria brushes it off, quickly changing the subject and steering the conversation elsewhere. While the group takes a break, 𝐂𝐤𝐸 splashes around in a pool of water, carefree and enjoying himself. Seeing him having so much fun, 𝐂𝐸𝐿 decides to join in, removing her plot armor and giving Tama a clear view of what's beneath. Vulcan soon joins, and the three take a refreshing dip together. However, as Tama swims, he tries hard to focus on anything but their exposed skin. During their break, 𝐂𝐸𝐿 casually asks Vulcan about her usual dungeon party, unknowingly bringing up a sensitive topic. Vulcan explains that her party disbanded after 2 members fell in love, and the female adventurer became pregnant. The couple decided to leave their adventuring life behind and settle down. The conversation then takes an unexpected turn when Vulcan mentions that elemental cats like Tama are capable of crossbreeding, speculating about what might happen if Tama grows larger and enters a serious heat season. As their break ends, the group heads to the next dungeon floor, where they encounter a fierce minotaur. Unlike the goblins and ropers from earlier, this creature is a formidable opponent. 𝐂𝐸𝐿 approaches carefully, accelerating toward the beast and executing her whirlwind slash technique. However, her attack barely scratches the minotaur's thick hide, leaving her shaken. Vulcan steps in, offering encouragement and helping 𝐂𝐸𝐿 regain her composure. Motivated by Vulcan's encouragement, 𝐂𝐸𝐿 regains her focus and unleashes a series of faster, more aggressive attacks. Overwhelmed by her speed, the minotaur begins swinging its massive weapon recklessly. One of its wild swings hits the ceiling, causing chunks of debris to fall dangerously close to Vulcan. Acting swiftly, Tama uses his howling skill to deflect the falling rubble, saving Vulcan just in time. Inspired by Tama's quick thinking and courage, 𝐂𝐸𝐿 spots an opening and delivers a devastating strike straight to the minotaur's chest, taking the beast down once and for all. As Tama cheers for 𝐂𝐸𝐿's hard-earned victory, Vulcan stands in awe, marveling at the little cat's strength and courage. Her thoughts wander as she can't help but think that Tama is a really powerful alpha male. Back at the Adventurers Guild, 𝐂𝐸𝐿, Vulcan, and Tama turn in the loot they gathered during their dungeon raid. They then approach Arnold, who inspects the deep cut marks on the minotaur remains and asks who was responsible for dealing such impressive damage. With a proud smile, Vulcan explains that the marks were the result of 𝐂𝐸𝐿's newly refined skills. Arnold, remembering how much weaker 𝐂𝐸𝐿 had been when she first arrived in town, praises her for her remarkable growth and dedication. Blushing at the compliment, 𝐂𝐸𝐿 thanks Arnold, feeling a deep sense of pride and accomplishment. With their earnings in hand, the trio heads to a local restaurant to celebrate their successful adventure. At the restaurant, Vulcan wastes no time indulging in heavy refills, impressing Tama, who can't help but wonder if she's a seasoned drinker. 𝐂𝐸𝐿 takes the opportunity to express her gratitude to Vulcan for her support during the raid, admitting how much fun she had working together. Vulcan shares the same sentiments, showing off a rare medicinal herb she collected in the dungeon as a memento. Their lively conversation stirs a sense of nostalgia in Tama, reminding him of his past life as an adventurer, when he had comrades to share such moments with. Even so, Tama admits to himself that his current life isn't bad at all. Being the spoiled pet of a stunning elf is a dream few would decline. As their bond deepens, Vulcan proposes that they form an official party. Caught off guard, 𝐂𝐸𝐿 is flattered but too shy to respond. Noticing her hesitation, Tama playfully nibbles her hand and places it on top of Vulcan's, sealing the agreement on her behalf. The group bursts into cheers, celebrating the beginning of their new partnership. Fueled by their growing partnership, they decide to order more drinks and turn the evening into an unforgettable celebration. Later that night, Tama finds himself squished between 𝐂𝐸𝐿 and Vulcan's metaphorical plot armor. The snug and awkward situation makes it nearly impossible for him to sleep, especially when he hears 𝐂𝐸𝐿 muttering in her sleep about hoping Tama doesn't get too rough. Feeling both suspicious and mildly flustered, he somehow manages to keep his composure. In need of a distraction, Tama checks his stats and is startled to discover he's eligible for evolution. However, evolving might turn him into a massive behemoth, potentially putting an end to the life he currently shares with 𝐂𝐸𝐿 and Vulcan. Prioritizing loyalty and companionship over raw power, Tama resolves to stay as their beloved and dependable pet. The next morning, while strolling through town, 𝐂𝐸𝐿 and Tama come across 2 thugs harassing a young girl, accusing her of being a pickpocket. 𝐂𝐸𝐿 wastes no time stepping in, and as soon as the thugs catch sight of her elemental cat, they flee to avoid any trouble. Area consoles the girl, discovering that she's an orphan, and takes her to a local church where nuns care for other children. Listening to Aria's heartfelt discussion with the nuns, 𝐂𝐿 feels a deep sense of admiration for his master's kindness, and silently vows to support her even more than ever. That evening, Arnold summons Aria to the Adventurers Guild to congratulate her on her promotion to C rank. As a token of recognition for her hard work, he presents her with a gleaming new rank pendant. However, their celebration is cut short by a commotion near the quest board. Arnold explains that people have been disappearing in Leonard, a nearby town, and rumors suggest that demons may be involved. Upon hearing this, Aria's determination sharpens. Fueled by her deep-seated grudge against demons, she eagerly asks for more details and declares her intention to take on the emergency quest without a moment's hesitation. After hearing the details of the case, Aria pressed Arnold relentlessly for every piece of information she had. Vulcan felt uneasy watching the elf's eagerness to take charge, doubting whether she was truly up to the task. However, Aria's resolve remained firm. She was determined to act swiftly to prevent more people from becoming victims. Impressed by her determination, Vulcan offered his assistance, and Arnold remarked that it wouldn't be surprising if a mercenary company soon decided to recruit the two of them. Just then, a young man wearing a tunic entered the guild. Introducing himself as Cedric, he was immediately recognized by the adventurers as the Duke's eldest son, renowned for his expertise in managing labyrinths. Cedric greeted Vulcan warmly and assured both her and Aria that they would soon stand together in battle. 𝐂𝐿 then recalled Cedric from the legendary war known as Ragnarok, where humanity waged a desperate fight against demons. Although the losses were catastrophic, victory was ultimately secured thanks to a prodigious boy, the Grand Mage, who led them to triumph and became a legendary hero. Amid the excitement, Aria expressed concern that their group was too small to face such overwhelming threats. Arnold, clearly charmed by Cedric, reassured her, insisting that Cedric's abilities were enough to astonish anyone. As Aria affectionately clung to him, Arnold reminded her that such gestures should be kept private. Curious, Aria asked if they were a couple, and Vulcan confirmed it, leaving 𝐂𝐿 completely baffled. Remaining silent until they returned home, 𝐂𝐿 couldn't help but notice his master's unease. It was understandable, given the dangers of traveling with someone as legendary as the hero. The cat 𝐂𝐿 licked the elf's face, seemingly trying to comfort her, and she responded with a kiss. Surprised by the affectionate exchange, 𝐂𝐿 quickly refocused as the group prepared to set out on their journey. Along the way, they met new allies: the silver-haired swordsman Danny, the humanoid monster Howard, the fiery red-headed Kenny, and the cheerful Marietta. Aria introduced 𝐂𝐿, who immediately charmed everyone with his undeniable cuteness. Marietta even insisted on taking turns carrying him. Their peaceful journey was suddenly interrupted when a group of orcs blocked the road. Cedric calmly instructed Danny to deal with the threat, and the swordsman dispatched the orcs effortlessly, without breaking a sweat. Vulcan, intrigued by Danny's abilities, inquired about his fighting style, and Kenny confirmed that Danny hadn't even used any skills. Aria began to understand just how powerful the heroes of Ragnarok were, while 𝐂𝐿 was in awe of Danny's raw strength, eager to one day fight alongside him. As night fell, they arrived at Leonard Village, where the grateful villagers warmly welcomed Cedric and his team. One villager shared troubling news. Many locals had mysteriously disappeared, including a search party lost in the ruins, and another girl who had been abducted the previous night. The revelation stirred painful memories for Aria, reminding her of the invasion that had devastated her homeland. The village leader then explained that Cedric's knights were the villagers' last hope. Noticing the group's exhaustion from their travels, the villagers quickly prepared a hearty meal to help them recover. Later, as they settled into their lodging, Aria's curiosity got the better of her, and she asked why each of her companions had chosen to become knights. Danny revealed that his family's poverty had forced him to join in order to repay their debts, while Howard shared a similar story of hardship. Kenny explained that she needed money to buy medicine for her ailing sister, and Marietta said she sought freedom for her father, who had been enslaved. Listening to these heartfelt stories, 𝐂𝐿 couldn't help but sense the sorrow hidden behind their motivations. Even Aria began to regret asking the question, feeling the weight of their struggles. The night, however, felt no shame in their choices. They had faced their struggles, paid their dues, and were now forging their own paths. Cedric's reason for joining, though, was entirely different. He admitted he had no interest in love or family obligations. As the Duke's son, he joined the order not out of duty, but because he lacked a greater purpose and found enjoyment in slaying monsters. While his blunt honesty didn't sit well with everyone, no one voiced any objections. After dinner, it was time for everyone to bathe. While the girls enjoyed a relaxing soak, the boys, driven by youthful mischief, attempted to sneak a peek. Tama, ever watchful, caught them in the act. With a booming shout, he sent Danny and Howard scrambling back to their quarters. Thoroughly embarrassed, Cedric observed their hurried retreat with mild amusement, quietly pondering their excitement for the journey, a feeling he couldn't entirely share. Once the group was refreshed, they pressed on, venturing deeper into the foreboding labyrinth. Unbeknownst to them, a malevolent creature was silently stalking their every move. To this hidden predator, the adventurers were nothing more than prey, watched closely as it gathered its strength and prepared to execute its deadly plans. Before long, their progress was halted by a pack of werewolves blocking their path. Howard, acting as the tank, stepped forward with his massive shield, taunting the wolves to draw their attention and create an opening for his companions to strike. Cedric demonstrated his unparalleled swordsmanship with flawless precision, while Arya dove into the battle, determined to prove herself. Tama, noticing the armored werewolves, briefly considered unleashing a powerful roar, but instead chose a water-based attack. With perfect aim, he struck one werewolf down and swiftly eliminated two more, leaving his party in awe of his skill. Meanwhile, the hidden monster, observing from the shadows, was taken aback by how quickly his wolves had been defeated, especially by Tama, whose command of elemental power was unexpected. Despite their impressive strength, the monster knew he couldn't allow these intruders to advance further. Resolving to escalate the situation, he prepared to intervene, whether by unleashing more weapons or stepping in himself. Back with the heroes, everyone was shocked by the elemental cat's abilities. Arya, utterly captivated, openly expressed her admiration, even suggesting she wouldn't mind being subdued by Tama's strength. He found her words peculiar, but Tama resisted his animal instincts, reminding himself that Arya was still his master. They soon arrived at a chamber filled with an oppressive, crushing atmosphere, so Cedric raised his hand, halting the group. Then, from the shadows, emerged Beryl Astaroth, the labyrinth's master. He declared that their journey would end here, revealing himself as a surviving demon seeking vengeance for his fallen king. Danny immediately accused Beryl of targeting Leonard Village out of revenge, but the demon dismissed the claim with a sinister grin, explaining that the town was merely the beginning of a much larger scheme. Without hesitation, he summoned a group of trolls to attack. Realizing the threat, Cedric quickly ordered the team to split up. But Beryl had anticipated this move and conjured a barrier that isolated Tama from the rest of the group. As a troll charged at Tama, he fought back fiercely, managing to tear off its arm, to his frustration. However, the severed limb regenerated almost instantly. Meanwhile, Cedric's team found themselves surrounded by enemies, leaving them with no choice but to place their hopes in Cedric's leadership to guide them to safety. Cedric unsheathed his blade, which began to pulse with dark magic, and with a wicked laugh, he charged at two trolls, slicing them apart so thoroughly they couldn't regenerate, removing them from the battlefield entirely. Beryl's eyes widened as he recognized the forbidden magic. Cedric wielded an ability used only by the great mage during the Ragnarok War. Cedric smirked with amusement because this was going to be so fun for him. Meanwhile, Tama attempted a stone war attack, but the trolls barely flinched, and their wounds healed instantly. Realizing the danger, Tama retreated, his mind racing as he considered whether to evolve into his stronger form. However, evolving would mean breaking his bond with Arya, a sacrifice Tama refused to make. Resolute in his choice to stay by her side, he unleashed Flame Roar, scorching the trolls and preventing their wounds from regenerating. His daring tactic succeeded, and the trolls collapsed in defeat. Enraged by the relentless attack, Beryl prepared for the next confrontation. Vulcan charged forward with his massive hammer, swinging it powerfully, but Beryl skillfully dodged and deflected Arya's knife strike with his dagger. Smirking, Beryl mocked the hammer's slow and predictable movements. However, he was caught off guard when Vulcan suddenly kicked up a cloud of dust, temporarily blinding him. Seizing the opportunity, Area darted forward and drove her blade into Beryl's chest. At first, he dismissed the wound as trivial, but then light radiated from the elf's enchanted dagger, amplifying the damage and forcing him to his knees. Snarling in pain, Beryl struck back with his dagger, delivering a vicious wound to Area far more than a simple cut. The group rushed to her side, panic setting in as Tama feared the weapon might be poisoned. Meanwhile, Beryl, still alive, smirked darkly and declared that humanity would crumble when true power returned. Then, with those ominous words, his body began to petrify, turning to stone before crumbling into dust. Meanwhile, the poison rapidly spread through Area's arm. Cedric examined the wound with a grim expression, identifying it as dragon venom, a lethal toxin. Howard pressed her arm against his enchanted shield, hoping to slow the poison's progress, while the group hurried back to Leonard Village. Upon their arrival, the village doctor confirmed their fears. Dragon venom was invariably fatal within a day and a half, and survival was impossible without the eye of an earth dragon. Desperate to save Area, the group debated the idea of hunting the beast, but Cedric adamantly objected, insisting there wasn't enough time. As Area's pain grew unbearable, Tama, consumed by guilt and despair, leapt out the window and took off. Memories of Area saving his life overwhelmed Tama, and he made a solemn vow to repay her kindness, no matter the cost. Determined, he raced to the ruins where he had been reborn as an elemental cat, ready to confront the Earth Dragon, the same beast he had fought before and barely escaped. The dragon, surprised to see Tama return, sneered and taunted him for fleeing during their last encounter. But this time, Tama didn't falter. Deep down, he understood that his current strength wasn't enough to win. With no other options, Tama made a life-altering choice. He decided to evolve into a full behemoth, unleashing his ultimate power to save Area. Tama, now towering in his massive form, unleashes a torrent of flames, roaring furiously at the dragon below. However, the beast is far too quick, lunging forward with incredible speed, spewing her own blaze of fire before clamping her scorching jaws around Tama's throat. Tama's pupils tremble in agony, yet this was all part of his carefully orchestrated plan. He had anticipated that the dragon, overconfident in her attack, would leave herself vulnerable. As she bites down, Tama retaliates by snapping his flame-coated tail into her eye, bursting it like a fragile water balloon. The dragon collapses in defeat, but the victory comes at a cost. Tama's mana is completely drained, reverting him to his small, fluffy form. There's no time to lament his diminished state, as the dragon eye must be delivered to his master. Without hesitation, he tucks the dragon eye into his inventory, spreads his bat-like wings, and takes flight to bring it to Area. Back at their home, Area lies bandaged and struggling to cling to life. Vulcan stays by her side, his eyes brimming with tears, while the rest of the group observes the heartbreaking scene in hushed silence. Suddenly, a loud thud outside breaks the tension, startling everyone. Cedric and Danny rush out to discover the Earth Dragon's lifeless body, and a tiny, battered Tama sprawled on top of it, covered in blood and utterly drained. Cedric quickly declares that there's no time for explanations, instructing everyone to grab the dragon eye and focus on saving Area immediately. As the group scrambles to act, Tama quietly prays for Area, unaware that she remains ensnared in a harrowing nightmare. In her dream, Area finds herself surrounded by flames as her village is reduced to ruins, torn apart by destruction. At just 13 years old, her home was attacked by demons searching for the Philosopher's Stone, slaughtering everyone in their path without mercy. In the chaos, we see young Area trembling with fear, trying to flee but accidentally crossing paths with the demons. Paralyzed by terror, she could only shake uncontrollably. Just as all hope seemed lost, an elemental cat, strikingly similar to Tama, appeared out of nowhere and saved her life. Suddenly, Area jolts awake, the vivid memory of her past still sharp in her mind. At that moment, she realizes why she has always felt such a deep affection for cats. Her gaze falls on Tama, curled up peacefully beside her, and a profound sense of gratitude washes over her. The next morning, everyone is relieved and overjoyed overjoyed to see Area looking noticeably better. Arnold, overwhelmed by emotion, begins sobbing uncontrollably. Although she's no longer in immediate danger, traces of the toxin still remain in her system, requiring Area to spend the next few days in recovery to fully heal. Later that evening, Tama ventures into the forest alone, seeking out monsters to test his growing abilities. Since his clash with the Earth Dragon, he's been wrestling with the mechanics of his evolutionary forms. While his colossal form seems to have vanished, he's discovered that he gained new powers from the dragon. Spotting a towering minotaur in the distance, Tama seizes the opportunity to try out his newly acquired Dragon Claw and Dragon Fang. With swift, devastating precision, he takes down the monster in seconds, astonished by the sheer power he now wields. Suddenly, the faint sound of footsteps catches Tama's ear. Emerging from the shadows is a maiden, her torn clothing and elegant features creating a stark contrast with the unnerving aura she exudes. What's peculiar is how she speaks to Tama directly, referring to him as the Strong One, almost as if she's familiar with him. Even more unsettling, she swiftly snatches one of Tama's armor pieces, as though she's been tracking him. The woman then questions why Tama is in his furball form, her curiosity quickly escalating into a frenzied obsession. She begins chasing him, shouting about his strong body and trying to grab him. Terrified, Tama lets out a screech and darts toward a tiny hole, barely evading her outstretched hands. Her erratic and deranged behavior leaves him utterly shaken. While he manages to escape, he then returns to Area, who is peacefully asleep, and curls into her arms for comfort, still shaken by the encounter. As he drifts off, Tama can't shake the eerie feeling that the crazy woman seems familiar. The following day, Area dresses Tama in an adorable linen outfit adorned with frills, making him look irresistibly cute. The two then head out for a picnic, where Area lays out a delightful spread of treats and hands Tama some berries to snack on. As they enjoy the peaceful moment, Area brings up the Earth Dragon, reminiscing about how they had found Tama bloodied and exhausted beside its lifeless body. She then begins to share more about her past, asking Tama if he remembers the stories she had told him before. Area recounts the harrowing attack on her village, Lumines, when demons had invaded, and how an elemental cat had come to her rescue. The village's salvation ultimately came from the Sword Saint, who single-handedly vanquished the demons. On that day, young Area had made a solemn vow to become a strong warrior, leaving her mother and family behind with the promise that she would return even stronger. However, Area's voice trembles as she admits she feels like she's always being saved, whether by Vulcan, Cedric's party, or Tama himself. Tears then form in her eyes as she confesses that, despite her vow to protect her comrades and her people, it feels like she's the one constantly needing protection. Tama quickly jumps to his feet, comforting Area as she wipes her tears. She understands what he's trying to tell her, that she shouldn't feel down because, after all, she defeated Beryl herself and deserves some credit. Later, Area and Tama pay a visit to Vulcan, who reveals that the armor Area had commissioned is finally ready. Area had amassed a small fortune as a reward for defeating Beryl and supplemented it by selling the loot from the trolls that Tama had taken down. She had invested the entire amount into purchasing top-notch armor. Although it came at a steep price, Vulcan reassures her that her safety is worth every coin. The new armor is both stylish and functional, and Area's excitement is palpable. She bounces around joyfully, thrilled by how lightweight and comfortable it feels. Vulcan begins explaining the intricate details of the armor's craftsmanship, but Tama remains silent, simply admiring how impressive his master looks in her new battle attire. The three of them then decide to take a trip and test the armor in action. As they enter a tunnel, the atmosphere is tense because it's been some time since Area has ventured into such a place. Tama jumps off her shoulder and uses his Lion King's blessing to grant her and Vulcan resistance to fire and ice, a gesture that makes Area gush over how adorable he is. Soon, the group encounters an ogre, and Area doesn't hesitate. She charges forward with blinding speed, surprising even Vulcan because she didn't even use her skill. With one precise blow, she beheads the creature, leaving it no chance to counterattack. Area celebrates her success, praising the armor and her sharp moon knives. Their moment of joy is abruptly cut short when Tama freezes, his instincts picking up on a disturbing presence nearby. From the shadows emerges the unsettling woman, muttering cryptically about destiny and her mission to find 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿. Confused, Area asks if she's a lost adventurer from ruin, but the woman dismisses the idea, claiming she knows nothing of such a place. Instead, she declares herself a being born of darkness, reaching out toward 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 with a desperate intensity. Vulcan speculates that she might be suffering from amnesia, but her behavior only becomes stranger. Her rambling turns more erratic, spilling secrets best left unspoken. Before stunning everyone with an outrageous demand, she insists that 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 must impregnate her. Area remains calm and waves her off, firmly stating that 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 is just a little kitten. 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿, horrified, hides in Area's arms for safety. Seeing this, the woman gets further enraged and accuses Area of taming 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 and stealing him away. Despite the bizarre interaction, Area remains compassionate and invites the woman to join their group, believing it's safer than leaving her alone where she might end up as a slave or worse. Area reassures 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 that he will be protected, and the woman reluctantly agrees, seeing this as her best chance to stay close to 𝐃𝐈𝐿. On the way back, they decide to give the wild woman a name. Though she shows little interest, Area points to a star and suggests the name Stella, explaining that it means beautiful in her homeland. Even 𝐃𝐈𝐿 seems to approve, and the woman eventually agrees to be called Stella. Once they return home, the challenging task of washing Stella begins. Impatient, she repeatedly asks how long it will take, but Area remains determined to scrub her thoroughly. When the bath is finally over, Stella feels refreshed and delighted, jumping around and marveling at the peculiar stone used to clean her. Vulcan corrects her, explaining that it's called soap. Overcome with excitement, Stella dives into the pool with a cannonball and splashes around like an exuberant child. Area then calls 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 over to wash his little feet. Seeing this, Stella gets jealous. She yells that it's not fair and demands to wash 𝐃𝐈𝐿 herself, but Area calmly turns her down, saying only she, as his owner, has that privilege. Later that night, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 wakes up to Stella telepathically calling him. He sees her creepily staring at him. To his shock, they're communicating through their minds. Stella reminds him of how he slaughtered her, confusing 𝐃𝐈𝐿 until she mentions the labyrinth. That's when he realizes she is the reincarnated Earth Dragon. Stella explains that she was born from darkness, gifted with S-rank abilities that made her untouchable by other creatures until 𝐃𝐈𝐿 defeated her by destroying her eye. After her defeat, she was reborn and reincarnated, much like 𝐃𝐈𝐿, but this time as a frail and tattered maiden. In the final moments of her past life, she made a vow to seek out 𝐃𝐈𝐿 in her next life, and she wasted no time in fulfilling that promise. 𝐃𝐈𝐿 listens nervously, his posture tense and hunched, as he processes her story. Hesitantly, he asks if she has returned to take revenge, but Stella reveals that her intentions are far more sinister. Stella then calmly proclaims that she has completely surrendered to him and has no desire for battle. Instead, she confesses her true intention. All she wants is his baby kitties to reproduce, leaving 𝐃𝐈𝐿 utterly horrified. She passionately declares that he is the only strong male she has ever encountered and admits that she has fallen hopelessly in love with him. Suddenly, without warning, Stella lunges at 𝐃𝐈𝐿, her intentions unmistakable. However, Area intervenes just in time, pulling 𝐃𝐈𝐿 to safety and leaving Stella trembling in a corner, consumed with shame. Area firmly scolds Stella, warning her to stay away from 𝐃𝐈𝐿, before calmly turning and heading back to bed. As 𝐃𝐈𝐿 tries to relax, he can still hear Stella's eerie muttering in the shadows, vowing that she will eventually find a way to get to him. The next morning, Area invited Stella to breakfast, tasting real food for the very first time. Stella momentarily lost herself in pure bliss before quickly regaining her composure and engaging in another internal conversation with 𝐃𝐈𝐿. After finishing their meal, Area decided to take Stella on a stroll through town, hoping that the sights might trigger some of the memories Stella claimed to have forgotten. However, the only thing Stella could remember was the image of 𝐃𝐈𝐿 leaping into her golden gloves, which she insisted was the only mystery she truly cared about solving. This made 𝐃𝐈𝐿 realize that, in Stella's perspective, Area was the stronger of the two. Area then suggested that Stella consider becoming an adventurer as a way to find purpose. To help her prepare, she brought Stella to Vulcan's shop to address her plot cannons. Both Area and Vulcan were slightly doubtful about Stella's choice of an outfit that looked like something out of an online catalog. But Stella was thrilled with how the snug fit kept her melons secure and comfortable. Afterward, Area focused on finding the right weapon for Stella. However, Stella dismissed the need for concern by demonstrating her half-dragon abilities, revealing that she still retained a great deal of strength from her past life. The group experimented with various weapons until Stella decided on a massive shield designed for giants. When 𝐂𝐤𝐤 curiously asked why she hadn't chosen a sword, Stella explained that her defeat against him had taught her the value of prioritizing defense. Feeling satisfied, she paired the shield with a sword for balance, and the group proceeded into the dungeon to test her new gear, with Area assigning 𝐂𝐤𝐤 to keep a close watch on her during the battle. Before Vulcan could come up with a proper plan, Stella rushed ahead and stumbled upon 3 goblins casually enjoying a meal. The startled goblins immediately went on the offensive, prompting Area and Vulcan to yell for Stella to fall back and regroup with 𝐂𝐤𝐤. However, Stella paid no attention to their warnings. She dropped her shield and sword, unleashing her dragon claws to kill 2 of the goblins in an instant. The 3rd goblin attempted a desperate counterattack from behind, but Stella snatched up her sword mid-swing and obliterated the creature with a single, decisive strike. Area and Vulcan were left utterly frozen in shock, completely paralyzed by what they had just witnessed. Meanwhile, 𝐂𝐤𝐤 quietly noted that Stella still retained the same extraordinary abilities she had in her previous life. With no goblins left to oppose her, Stella grew increasingly irritated, proclaiming her desire for stronger opponents. The group decided to venture further into the dungeon and eventually came across 2 orcs. Wasting no time, Stella hurled the first orc against the wall with a thunderous impact. The second orc hesitated, clearly realizing it had made a grave mistake by attacking, but it was already too late. Stella swiftly dispatched it, leaving the corridor soaked in the remains of her enemies. Encouraged by her display of power, the group pressed even deeper into the dungeon until they reached a section infested with a roper slime. However, before Area could issue a warning, Stella recklessly charged straight into battle. Stella's confidence faltered the moment the slime's tentacles wrapped around her, sending an uncomfortable shiver down her spine. 𝐂𝐤𝐤 quickly pointed out the dangers of underestimating such creatures, warning her it might cost her life if she got caught again. Provoked by this, Stella recklessly launched another attack, only for the slime to counter by grabbing her sword and drenching her in sticky love juices. The unexpected assault caused Stella to lose her composure, prompting Area and Vulcan to rush in to rescue her. Meanwhile, 𝐂𝐤𝐤 noticed that Stella's erratic behavior seemed to be linked to her dragon instinct. Using one of his own tentacle skills, 𝐂𝐤𝐤 restrained both the girls and the slime before unleashing a powerful water blast that obliterated the slime, putting an end to the chaos caused by the creature. After regaining her composure, Stella felt deeply humiliated by her earlier display of weakness. 𝐂𝐤𝐤, however, offered her gentle words of reassurance, pledging to protect her from any harm in the future. This heartfelt promise once again ignited Stella's dragon instincts, causing her body to produce an overwhelming amount of dragon slime. Determined to learn from her missteps, Stella decided to accept Vulcan's guidance, making a firm vow to grow stronger and prove herself as a valuable member of the team. Their conversation brought back memories of the adventurers she had once defeated in her previous life, and she vividly recalled how powerful they had become when they worked as a team. The thought of reaching that same level of strength now filled her with renewed excitement and unwavering determination. At that moment, Area became overwhelmed by her own intrusive thoughts. She turned to 𝐂𝐤𝐤 and passionately pleaded with him to use his tentacle skill on her plot cannons. 𝐂𝐤𝐤 was left utterly speechless, unable to grasp the sheer absurdity of her request. Before he could even begin to process the situation, Area started shedding her armor with wild abandon. Thankfully, Vulcan stepped in just in time, successfully restraining Area before the situation could escalate any further. Shortly after, the group resumed their journey deeper into the dungeon, eagerly seeking their next unfortunate target. After some discussion, the group took a moment to plan Stella's role in their coordinated tactics. With her immense strength and durability, they decided she would take on the position of the team's vanguard, serving as both a shield and an enforcer. It wasn't long before they came across a group of orcs. Stella stepped forward without hesitation, raising her shield to draw the creature's attacks. One particularly aggressive orc charged recklessly at her, but Stella countered with a single, precise blow that severed its arm. As she closed in to deliver the finishing strike, the wounded orc, now consumed by fear, turned and bolted like a terrified pig, refusing to let it escape. Stella immediately gave chase, driven by unwavering determination. At the same time, 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐂𝐋𝐿 activated his enchanted enhancement ability to amplify Area and Vulcan's magical prowess, unintentionally fueling Area's already growing fixation on his eggplant. Together, they obliterated every remaining creature that dared to cross their path until they stumbled upon a tranquil dungeon bath. Without hesitation, the group decided to take a break and relax. What followed was pure chaos for 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐂𝐿 as he struggled to maintain control of his inner thoughts, while the girls shamelessly flaunted their melons, testing the limits of his self-restraint. The situation took an even more dramatic turn when Area, completely unapologetic, pulled 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 onto her chest, insisting it was the perfect spot for him to unwind. Not willing to back down, Stella pressed her dragon melons against Area's, sparking a heated rivalry over who truly deserved 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿's attention. Convinced beyond a doubt that Area was beneath her, Stella boldly proclaimed that she could treasure 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 far more than Area ever could. Naturally, Area wasn't about to concede, and their fiery disagreement escalated rapidly. Vulcan, stuck in the middle of the turmoil, tried to intervene by proposing a compromise, suggesting that Stella take the role of 𝐃𝐈𝐿's junior wife. However, this suggestion only added fuel to the fire, intensifying their argument even further. As the tension between them peaked, the sheer force of their clashing melons sent 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 hurtling straight into the ceiling, leaving him to question every decision that had brought him to this absurd moment. Later, the group made their way back to the guild to introduce Stella to Arnold. However, before they could officially register her as an adventurer, Arnold introduced them to a man named 𝐂𝐿𝐿𝐿, who had an unusual request. 𝐂𝐿𝐿𝐿 explained that he was preparing for a long journey and required a capable team to safeguard a highly valuable item. When Area curiously asked about the nature of this item, 𝐂𝐿𝐿𝐿 declined to discuss it in public. Instead, he led them to a secure storage facility, where he unveiled the mysterious object in question, Stella's own dragon carcass. The revelation left her utterly stunned. 𝐂𝐿𝐿𝐿 explains that this is the remains of a formidable creature that rebelled against its foe. At least, that's how it appears to the merchant, leading him to purchase the item. As Stella remains fixated on the skeleton, 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 reaches out to her telepathically, asking if she's alright. She replies that it feels strange because the moment her eyes fell on it, a memory of being killed resurfaced, overwhelming her with sorrow. In reality, this pain stems from the deep emotions she holds for the powerful 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿. At that moment, Arnold arrives, and just before Area departs, he hands her the Alpha promotion tag for rank B. Following that, the group embarks on their escort mission, while Arnold and Vulcan see the travelers off. As they journey onward, the adventurers face several threats, but none have managed to halt the carriage's progress, as Area, Stella, and 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐿𝐿 perform their roles flawlessly. As the day comes to an end, the group sets up camp, and 𝐂𝐿𝐿𝐿 gives Area some lilies of the valley. Stella curiously asks if they're edible, to which 𝐂𝐿𝐿𝐿 explains that his wife, Alyssa, loves these flowers and that he used to gather them for her. Upon learning that the man has a wife, 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐿 realizes why he shows no interest in her master. Area then inquires about his plans for the Earth Dragon skeleton, and he admits that it's a good question. A weapons merchant had begun stockpiling rare materials, believing that a great war was on the horizon. Hearing this, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 recalls the moment when the demon they battled mentioned that a powerful creature had been resurrected. Finally, 𝐂𝐿𝐿 remarks that they should reach Gladstone by tomorrow, suggesting that it's best to rest. With that, the group settles down to sleep. But at a certain hour in the early morning, an unusual phenomenon suddenly starts spreading across the area. 𝐃𝐈𝐿 rushes out of his tent, trying to grasp what's happening, as everything around them appears to be affected, except for their camp. Or so it seems. Area wakes up in the midst of this, while 𝐂𝐿𝐿 reassures everyone that the cargo is secure, explaining that this is merely the formation of a new labyrinth. Few are aware of it, but it is indeed possible for a dungeon to spontaneously emerge in the middle of nowhere. The group moves forward, passing through the thick fog that had formed during the dungeon's creation, and 𝐂𝐿𝐿 assumes they made it through safely. Area feels relieved but admits that she would love to return and explore. Meanwhile, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 contemplates the fact that newly formed labyrinths always contain rare materials, freshly available for the taking. After distancing themselves themselves from the fog. 𝐂𝐤𝐠 asks the adventurers if they're interested in entering the labyrinth, noting that opportunities to explore such a freshly formed place are rare. Naturally, it would be even more worthwhile if they agreed to sell any valuable items they discovered to him. The two become excited about the challenge, but the merchant advises them to stay alert, as this place didn't exist just hours ago, meaning no one can predict what lies within. Therefore, every precaution is necessary. Keeping this in mind, as they near the fog, 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 activates the Divine Lion's protection to shield his team. With this enhancement, Stella feels no need to restrain herself against any threat and immediately charges forward despite Area calling for her to slow down. Unsure of how to rein in Stella, the elf recalls that Vulcan had written something down as a precaution in case she lost control. The note contained the following message: "Stella, if you fight alongside me, I'll allow you to hug 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 once." Upon hearing these words, Stella quickly changes her mind and turns back, joining her allies once more and settling down, all for a chance to grab his favorite cat. Amidst this, the group suddenly hears feminine laughter echoing around them, and a magical sphere appears, inquiring whether the adventurers are seeking the treasure. The orb invites them to follow, and without hesitation, Stella dashes after it. However, the illusion leads them straight into an ambush, where two giant monkeys charge at them. Stella does her job as a tank, taunting the enemies and making them focus on her. When one of the monkeys headbutts her shield, Area takes the opportunity and kills both monsters. Area praises the excellent teamwork of her companion, but Stella mourns she didn't do it for the team, but specifically for 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿. Amidst this, a nearby bush suddenly begins to shake, and a soft, innocent voice attempts to feign innocence, claiming that no one is there. Stella, not fooled, firmly orders them to come out before they have to chase them down. In response, two pixies emerge, each vastly different in size. The smaller one introduces herself as Lily, a high pixie, while the other one is Fairy, a high dryad. Stella curiously asks what these creatures taste like, to which Area responds that they are pixies, typically found in labyrinth forests, though she has never encountered any herself. Finally, she introduces herself to the duo, but the two seem only interested in 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿, immediately picking him up to pet him. Feeling this is unfair, Stella attacks them in frustration, but 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 quickly intervenes through telepathy, asking her to calm down. Stella insists that these pests tried to kill the group by leading them into a trap, but Lily quickly denies the accusation. She explains that she and Fairy had no such intentions, they simply wanted to befriend the elemental cat and were merely guiding him toward the treasure. Speaking of treasure, Fairy reveals the grand item hidden behind this labyrinth. Upon opening the box, they discover that it is the exquisite flask of a potion that certainly seems very rare. Lily and Fairy inform them that there are other treasures like this in the area, but to access them, they first need to obtain a key hidden within a tree swarming with giant evil bees. Just as they receive this information, the insects launch an attack, forcing Stella to shield herself, while 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 swiftly responds with 𝐸𝐿𝐻𝐿. At the same time, Area follows up with Whirlwind Cut, striking down all the bees in their path. After their victory, Fairy picks up 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 again, emphasizing how strong he is despite being so small and cute at the same time. Lily praises the cat's two companions, while Stella makes it clear she's the type who gets things done. Meanwhile, Area retrieves a key from a tree, and Lily and Fairy explain that she will be responsible for opening the door to the labyrinth's boss, who guards the dungeon's main treasure. Area assumes that this place must contain some exceptionally rare items and suggests they take a break before moving forward, considering their exhaustion from the long journey and the uncertainty of what awaits them. At that moment, the pixies eagerly request to be taken to a human city, expressing their long-held desire to visit one. At dawn, the pixies are enchanted by their first visit to a city, and Area asks them to stay close so they don't get lost. But the pixies are so mesmerized that they run off towards the first enticing smell they detect. Consequently, Area has to scold them, reminding them that they could be captured if they are careless, since fairies are rare and valuable. Finally, Area declares that it's time to head to 𝐿𝐿𝐻𝐿's store and see what they might come across along the way, only to find the pixies once again darting off, snatching a bowl of human food from a nearby stall. Seeing this, Stella insists insists on tasting it as well. Area quickly steps in to assure the stall owner that she will cover the cost, noticing his growing impatience. With that settled, Fairy finally gets the chance to try the food she had never encountered before. Some time later, after retrieving the rare item from the labyrinth, 𝐂𝐿𝐸 is thrilled to discover that it is the tear of truth, a liquid that prevents anyone who consumes it from lying. The merchant assumes that obtaining such an item must have been a great challenge, and just as Aria is about to explain the ordeal, the pixies suddenly burst into the room, behaving like two mischievous children. Upon seeing them, 𝐂𝐸 is somehow moved and apologizes for becoming emotional, but the truth is he had never seen pixies before. He then mentions he forgot to handle a matter and leaves without further explanation. Later, at bedtime, Stella approaches Tama to claim her reward, a hug from him, but the cat slaps Stella. However, this time even Aria admits her companion did a great job. Therefore, she asks her pet to grant just one hug. Reluctantly, Tama complies. At that moment, even Stella can barely believe what she's about to accomplish, so much so that she hesitates, unsure of how to claim her long-awaited reward. Finally, she gently pats the small creature before eagerly leaning in to sniff his belly with excitement. Meanwhile, Vulcan approaches the escort group after completing her work in the city, only to be caught off guard by a skeleton suddenly rising from the ground. However, since it poses no real threat, she effortlessly smashes it with her hammer. But as a bell tolls, a surge of purple energy surrounds the scattered bones, leaving Vulcan trying to make sense of what's unfolding. At that moment, the escort group reaches the boss's door and turns the key. Then, they enter the portal, leaving the fairies behind, who cheer for their companions. Upon reaching the other side, the team is confronted by a B-rank torrent dragon, which immediately launches a barrage of powerful magical projectiles, slamming into Stella's shield with force. However, Stella refuses to retreat. Pressing forward undeterred, she strikes the dragon with her shield, successfully drawing its attention to herself. Aria attempts to use the distraction to flank the enemy, but the dragon catches on and swings its tail toward her. Reacting swiftly, Stella dashes back, intercepting the attack with her shield to protect her ally. Determined to keep the beast occupied, she reassures her teammates that she'll handle it, urging them to join the fight and bring the battle to a swift resolution, all while taunting the dragon as much as possible. Tama is impressed by what Stella has been capable of doing in such a short time with the group. Again, the tank explains that she's the type of person who resolves things. As the torrent dragon strikes at her with its claw, Stella seizes its entire arm, creating a crucial opening in its defense, one that Tama immediately recognizes as his chance to act. Wasting no time, he unleashes flame howling and ensnares the enemy with his tentacles. At that moment, Aria sprints forward at full speed, delivering a swift slash to its throat, dealing a fatal wound that brings the battle to an end and secures their hard-earned victory. Tama rejoices in their victory, celebrating the defeat of their first boss and praising his master, while Stella proudly boasts that they couldn't have won without her assistance. Shortly after, the group discovers a treasure chest containing 2 scrolls. Upon activation, they release a surge of maximum energy into Aria's body, granting her an ancient ability known as Sacred Blade. With their new achievement, the group heads back to the labyrinth forest in search of the pixies, only to find that the two are nowhere to be seen. Growing concerned, Tama dashes toward the bowl of food Fairy had been holding, fearing that something may have happened to them. Meanwhile, in his office, 𝐂𝐸𝐸 rings his bell and contemplates that it won't be long before something significant begins. As he does so, his gaze lingers on a portrait of his wife, Alyssa. As they make their way back home, the group moves anxiously through the forest, completely unaware of where the 2 pixies might have disappeared. With their heads lowered, they return to the city, where Stella and Aria recount everything to Vulcan. Hearing their story, Vulcan proposes that they check the tavern. All of a sudden, a butler steps into the room accompanied by 2 hooded men, declaring that Count Gladstone is looking for Aria. As he speaks, it becomes evident that this man is assessing the women's bodies in a demeaning way, letting his gaze wander over each of them. He then comments on Stella and Vulcan, noting their striking presence and beauty, assuring that the Count would undoubtedly be delighted to see them. Stella has no clue what what the man is referring to but declines nonetheless. Area firmly states that they are occupied at the moment but assures him that they will visit the Count at a later time, whoever he may be. However, the butler clarifies that refusing a direct order from the Count is considered a crime. Realizing that the situation is more serious than it seems, Vulcan quickly responds, saying they will prepare right away. Thus, the butler waits for the women in the carriage outside. As the man leaves the shop, Stella asks why they need to go with this lunatic since they need to find the fairies, but Vulcan mentions that she's heard some intriguing things about this Count Gladstone. While riding in the carriage, Vulcan discloses that this noble has a reputation for abducting women. Stella then questions whether he might have taken Lily and Fairy, to which Vulcan confirms that this is precisely why they agreed to go with the Count's butler. After some time, they finally reach the noble's mansion, where the butler steps forward and knocks on his master's door to announce the arrival of the guests. The Count commands everyone to come inside, and as soon as he sees them seated on his sofa, he remarks that he has never encountered women as stunning as these. Vulcan expresses her gratitude for his hospitality, and Aria follows suit. Upon hearing this, the noble suddenly snaps his fingers, as if struck by a brilliant idea, and suggests that they could become his friends, or rather, his lovers. The faggot man confidently claims that no one has ever regretted this, while Thomas silently notes that this unsightly man is just as repulsive as the rumors suggested. Just then, the butler enters carrying a jug of tea and proceeds to pour a cup for each guest. Gladstone encourages everyone to drink, but the women remain visibly cautious, uncertain about what might be in the beverage. Vulcan politely declines, stating she isn't thirsty, but the Count insists they at least give it a try. With that, Aria prepares to take a sip, causing the man to nearly drool in anticipation. However, just before the elf can drink, Tama activates the Lion King's blessing, strengthening her allies and ensuring no harm befalls their bodies. Moments later, all three take a sip of the tea, and with undisguised delight, Gladstone eagerly asks for their thoughts. To his surprise, all three loved it and even asked for more, leaving the Count extremely confused and questioning his butler why they didn't pass out at his master's ear. The servant confesses he doesn't know, but will prepare a stronger dose. Amid the tension, Stella slams her fist on the table, demanding to know the whereabouts of Lily and Fairy. Without a second thought, she seizes the Count by his shirt, but he adamantly claims to know nothing. Through telepathic communication, Tama urges her to back off, and reluctantly, she releases him, hoping to defuse the situation. Aria still offers an apology for her friend's outburst. However, the Count suddenly turns accusatory, proclaiming that they must be demons who have taken possession of these women's bodies. He then declares that he must employ his family's secret purification method to cleanse their bodies and souls, beginning by locking them up immediately. Upon hearing this, the butler claps his hands, signaling the noble's subordinates, hooded and armed men, who immediately encircle the girls. Stella sarcastically thanks the heavens for leading them into this mess and gets ready to take the men down, but through telepathy, Tama warns that now isn't the right time. Meanwhile, Aria and Vulcan attempt to reassure the Count that they didn't come looking for trouble. Just then, a soldier rushes in, urgently informing the butler that an army of the undead has invaded the city, wreaking havoc among the population. To make matters worse, the horde is advancing straight toward the Count's mansion. Gladstone immediately commands everyone to get ready to flee, but the butler cautions that traveling now would be far too dangerous, suggesting instead that the Count should stay upstairs for his own safety. Finding the idea appealing, Gladstone swiftly orders all his servants to defend him with their lives before dashing up the staircase. The butler then inquires about what should be done with the visitors, but the foppish noble couldn't care less. With that, the noble's employees follow him, leaving the girls alone. Aria confesses she's worried about the people in the city and wishes to go out to do something against the invasion. Her friends agree that action must be taken. Outside, swarms of skeletons spread chaos throughout the territory as people frantically run for their lives, struggling to survive. Aria and Vulcan take charge, guiding the townsfolk toward the hills for safety. Once the civilians successfully escape, the elf jumps into battle, fighting alongside her elemental cat companion. Stella doesn't stay behind and smashes some skeletons with her shield, but finds the fact that they're so fragile too boring. Nearby, a skeleton approaches a defenseless child, but Vulcan saves the little girl by smashing the monster and placing the girl on her back to escape. Upon rejoining her allies, she asserts that there's no way they can take down all these skeletons and that their best option is to find the one controlling them. Agreeing with this strategy, Aria suggests they split up. Vulcan will focus on leading the townspeople to safety and protecting the little girl, while Aria, Stella, and Tama head off to track down the caster responsible for summoning these creatures. Meanwhile, the Count shelters on the rooftop next to the butler and a soldier, as the group of protagonists hears the sound of a bell ringing toward the mansion of 𝐂𝐿𝐴𝐻. They arrive there and come face to face with him. He explains that he's only seeking revenge, as Count Gladstone killed his fiancée, Alyssa. Fueled by hatred, the man summons even more skeletons, and Tama quickly recognizes him as a necromancer. 𝐿AZE admits that on his own, he can barely summon 2 skeletons, but with the assistance of Lily and Fairy, his power increases significantly. With that, the human unveils the 2 pixies concealed beneath his robe, provoking the group's fury. Tama suspects that 𝐿AZE used the bell to control the fairies, and that the arrow he's holding might also be connected to this. Speaking of which, 𝐿AZE uses the arrow to drain the mana from Lily and Fairy to fuel his selfish desires of summoning a true army. After all, as 𝐿AZE himself says, fairies possess extraordinary mana, and with their power, the human was able to unleash an explosion that turned his entire house into ruins, making way for the skeleton of the Earth Dragon that 𝐿AZE was so eager to procure. Having received everything he needed and more, the man mockingly thanks the opposing group, claiming that none of this would have been possible without them. With that, 𝐿AZE positions himself at the center of the giant skeleton's chest, as if becoming the very heart of the conjured beast. Overcome with fury at the sight of her body being desecrated in such a way, Stella charges headfirst through the horde of skeletons, tearing through them with relentless force, only to be swatted away by the dragon's massive paw. Reacting swiftly, Tama unleashes the 𝐂𝐴𝐻𝐿, shattering the enemy's skeletal tail, but to their dismay, each fractured bone seamlessly returns to its original place, reconstructing the tail with uncanny precision. Now it's Aria's turn, who unleashes her new skill, Holy Blade. With the holy damage, the dragon is finally struck. But the problem is that this skill drains a lot of mana from the user, risking her physical integrity. Noticing this, Tama realizes he cannot evolve into his Behemoth form at the moment, so he warns Stella that their master can't use Holy Blade again just yet. They need to buy some time and rescue Lily and Fairy. Without delay, Stella charges with her shield against the horde of skeletons, clearing a path toward the dragon, while Tama follows the same route through the air. In the heart of the city, the residents erect barricades and defend themselves as best they can, but Vulcan arrives, unwilling to abandon them to their fate. The little girl manages to break free from her back and dashes toward her mother. Meanwhile, Vulcan drags her hammer along the ground, carving a line that quickly erupts into a fiery barrier, cutting off the enemy's advance. Shifting back to Tama, he unleashes the flame howl, striking his target, but Stella ends up pinned beneath one of the dragon's massive paws. Drawing on her incredible strength, she pushes against it, using her shield as leverage, determined not to be defeated by a mere lifeless husk. Tama sees this as an opportunity to conjure his tentacles and grab Lily and Fairy, clearing the way for Aria to finish off 𝐿AZE. As the elf prepares her skill, Stella uses her integral traction technique to strengthen her legs, freeing herself from the paw and slicing off the beast's left arm with her sword. Tama joins the attack with the flame edge and cuts the dragon, while Aria delivers the final blow to the beast's core with Holy Blade. With that, the monster disappears into thin air, leaving 𝐿AZE on the ground, mourning deeply as he realizes his vengeance has vanished like dust in the wind. Aria steps forward, insisting that this isn't the real 𝐿AZE and that Alyssa would never have wished for revenge. Even so, the man refuses to forgive Count Gladstone and once again rings his bell, determined to lead his army to victory. But this time, only a single skeleton responds, slowly making its way toward the summoner. As it reaches him, the monster takes his hand and transforms into the image of his wife, surrounding them with the illusion of a vast, serene field. Alyssa smiles, remarking that her husband never thinks clearly when he's upset. 𝐿AZE begins to weep, pleading for her forgiveness and admitting that everything was his fault. Alyssa gently tells him that he must atone for his sins, and though the path will be difficult, he will find a way to overcome it. With that, she vanishes forever, taking the bell with her along with the entire skeletal army, which relied on the artifact for control. Meanwhile, in the heart of the city, Vulcan watches in shock as the undead dissolve into thin air, while Gladstone trembles in terror as the creatures continue scaling the roof. The next day, in the public square, the population gathers to witness an execution. Inside a tent nearby, the Count's butler claims this is the chance for the chief to demonstrate power. Then, Arya arrives with a jug of tea and serves a cup to Gladstone, who drinks the liquid with a smile, enchanted by the flavor of what seems to be a rather expensive beverage. At this, Tama acknowledges that the tea was indeed not cheap. Moments later, the Count makes his way to the guillotine, where 𝐂𝐿𝐴 is already in position for the fatal blow. However, before proceeding, the noble turns to the gathered citizens and introduces the true heroines of the city area, Stella and Vulcan. With that, he declares the execution of the man who brought this catastrophe upon the people of Gladstone and questions what could have driven him to commit such actions. 𝐿𝐴 replies that his actions were driven by a desire for vengeance over his wife's death. In response, Gladstone openly admits that he was the one who killed Alyssa, but claims that revealing this sooner would have jeopardized his plan. The crowd is left in shock upon hearing his confession, and in that moment, the Count realizes he has spoken unnecessarily. Holding a potion in her hand, Arya asks the Count if he knows anything about the women who vanished in the city. Still disoriented, Gladstone immediately confesses everything, admitting that he was the one who eliminated them all. Panicked, the noble demands to know what is happening, to which the elf calmly explains that she had mixed a small amount of truth drop into his tea, compelling him to reveal his crimes before the entire crowd. Furious, the crowd erupts in outrage against their corrupt and criminal leader, especially since the missing women were their own loved ones. Consumed by rage, they take matters into their own hands, ensuring that Gladstone faces justice at their hands. After everything unfolds, 𝐿𝐴 expresses his gratitude to the girls, thanking them for all they have done for him. Many days later, after openly confessing his crimes, Gladstone was stripped of his title as Count and sentenced to life in prison, while 𝐿𝐴, having avoided the death penalty, was instead sentenced to incarceration. The following day, as the group of protagonists rode in a carriage, Stella, feeling envious, questioned whether the pixies shouldn't head back to the forest. In response, Lily mentioned that she preferred to remain with the elemental kitten, while Fairy expressed her appreciation for being saved. Shortly after, the two gazed out the carriage window, captivated by the sight of the sea. Meanwhile, Vulcan was thrilled about their approach to Ruine, and Arya gently reminded her pet that they were returning to the place where they had first met. Soon after, they made their way to the guild, where Arnold welcomed them with a bear hug that wrapped around all the newcomers at once. Excited to hear their stories, the receptionist was eager to learn about their experiences in Gladstone. It wasn't just Arnold, every adventurer in the guild recognized Arya for defeating the S-rank undead dragon, granting her the reputation of a heroine. In celebration, Arnold presented Arya with a silver adventurer's tag. From that moment on, Arya was in a rank, while Stella advanced to B rank. Although thrilled about her promotion, Arya couldn't help but ask whether Vulcan had been promoted as well. Seeing Vulcan's uneasy expression at the question, Arnold remembered that she had been so attached to her current rank that she had chosen to decline a higher one. Vulcan then confirmed that she felt more comfortable sticking to her life as a blacksmith. A grand celebration commenced as the heroes of Ruine returned home. Moreover, the receptionist informed them that a gift from Gladstone had been delivered to the group, a 10-year supply of canned fruit. While the girls were astonished by the sheer quantity of food, Tama was already picturing the chaos of trying to store all those barrels at home. Arya pointed out that Vulcan had more available space and suggested she keep the barrels, but Vulcan countered, explaining that her storage was already cluttered with equipment and materials she regularly used. Meanwhile, Arnold suggested that it was about time for Arya to move out of her room and establish a place of her own, a home to call her own. Given the reward from their last mission, the guild employee was confident that the adventurer could afford a really nice place. Hearing that, Arya took a sip from her mug and declared that she was excited for her first major investment in life. It was truly the right moment to buy a residence where all their friends could live together happily. Finally, she turned to Tama for his thoughts, and while the cat remained silent, he clearly believed it was a great idea, just like all all her companions did. The next day, the group headed to a real estate agency in the commercial district called Handover Fist, where the attendant inquired about what the ladies were looking for in their new home. Stella simply stated that she wanted to enjoy plenty of meat, prompting the man to suggest that a well-equipped kitchen would be ideal. Lily and Fairy emphasized their wish for an abundance of grass and trees, so he made a note to include a large garden in the search. Aria expressed her desire for a spacious room, which made Tama start worrying about the budget. However, the real estate agent reassured them that he had just the right house at a bargain price. He then took the group to the mentioned location, where a beautiful mansion, secluded from the city, awaited its new residents. Each woman was delighted with her earlier requests, Stella with a kitchen, the fairies with the yard, and Aria with a room space. However, despite having one of the buyers so far, it was now time for the seller to reveal why he hadn't found any buyers for the house until now. Instead of a common bathroom with a shower stall, this house had an extra-large outdoor bath. Contrary to his expectations, the women simply loved the idea, so Aria closed the deal. By late afternoon, they had completed moving all their belongings into their new home. Lily and Fairy delighted in the softness of the new beds, happily bouncing on them, while Stella boasted about finally getting exactly what she wanted. Watching Stella haul the heaviest items as effortlessly as if they were half-kilo bags of rice, Tama mused that she had been an invaluable help during the move. Ironically, though, her reward for all that effort turned out to be the privilege of petting him. Stella, unbothered by this, treated the poor cat like a plaything, subjecting him to this humiliation as if he were merely a bargaining chip. Meanwhile, Aria watched the scene, finding it bizarre that the two remained silent, as if communicating telepathically. The following day, Vulcan showed up carrying 2 buckets filled with lobsters, instantly making the ladies' mouths water, especially Stella. Curious, Stella asked what kind of creature it was. Noting how tough it looked to eat, Vulcan explained that they were lobsters from Obel, a prized local delicacy well known and loved by the city's inhabitants. That evening, during the feast, Stella stayed true to her word, devouring meat without holding back, while everyone else also enjoyed the meal to the fullest. Later that night, Vulcan slept bundled up with Aria, with Tama nestled in the middle as always. As usual, the two had peculiar dreams, all somehow revolving around how the elemental cat should be using its tongue. Meanwhile, as much as he would have loved to sleep in that comfort, Tama had work to do, so he jumped off the bed and reflected on acquiring a new skill after the last battle, the elemental explosion. But more importantly, he had gained access to his third form, having sworn the second was the last. As always, he was afraid he wouldn't be able to revert to a cat after evolving, which left him thoughtful, lost in thought. Tama was suddenly startled by Stella, who appeared on the balcony after being awakened by the sound of his voice. He quickly apologized and told her to go back to sleep, but that was the last thing on her mind. Sensing that something was troubling him, she insisted she wouldn't rest until she found out what it was. With no way out, Tama admitted that he had unlocked a form even stronger than his second one. Hearing this, Stella went wild with excitement, eager to witness a transformation even more powerful than the one he had used to defeat her in her dragon form. Practically climbing the walls in her frenzy, she charged at the cat, demanding to be impregnated. The following day, as everyone enjoyed another hearty meal, Stella was still pursuing Tama telepathically with her selfish desires. Meanwhile, Lily and Fairy were keen on adding even more plants to the garden, and Aria wholeheartedly agreed, for her homeland, Luminous Village, was surrounded by every type of greenery. Therefore, she promised to look for a gardener after lunch, but the fairies insisted on handling the task themselves, so they hurried off to get started. Baffled, Tama had no idea that dryads and fairies possessed such extraordinary abilities. Not long after, Fairy began drumming while chanting about the awakening of spring's forces. Almost instantly, a tree started sprouting in the backyard, but Vulcan hurried outside in a panic to stop the process. After all, this wasn't just any tree, it was a world tree, a mythical entity whose roots contained extremely rare minerals. With that, she asked Fairy to surround it with normal trees to keep the world tree hidden, as it could attract unwanted attention if seen, which would not be positive at all. As if that wasn't enough, Fairy managed to create a life spring in the yard, water known to heal all diseases and wounds. According to Vulcan, this garden was going to be a monstrous task for Aria, left exposed. However, when Lily argued that the spring was great for the skin, Vulcan dropped the issue, thinking it might also be kept a secret, although she admitted having other concerns. Later, Later, inside the house, Vulcan and Area pointed out that fairies like Lily and Fairy could be targeted and kidnapped simply for possessing the kind of powers they had just displayed. While the fairies were understandably shaken by the thought, what truly puzzled Tama was how Vulcan seemed to know so much about the subject. When it came to rare materials, Vulcan could gain an advantage if she managed to obtain 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿. However, there was a problem. Area had already mentioned that only artifact blacksmiths were capable of working with this mineral. Tama also recalled that these specialists were an elite few, officially recognized by government authorities for their exceptional talent, having earned the prestigious title. In any case, Tama highly doubted that Vulcan was at that level given how she consistently rejected rank promotions. It was clear she lacked such lofty ambitions. At that moment, Arnold entered the house and apologized for intruding, but it turned out she had brought an urgent mission for the group. For some reason, a powerful monster had appeared on the first floor of the dungeon, and some people had already lost their lives in a confrontation with this creature. Thus, the team affirmed their commitment to investigating the situation, including the fairies. But soon, they realized they might just cause problems by exposing themselves in a dungeon and backed out. Seeing the sadness in their eyes, Tama let out a confident meow and stood tall, embracing his role as the team's knight, whose duty was to ensure everyone's safety. As for Area, while she couldn't quite tell what was going through her cat's mind, she quickly figured out that he wanted everyone to take part in this mission. With that settled, they all set off for the dungeon, where the fairies officially joined the team, even receiving protective equipment from Vulcan. At the entrance, they encountered an E-rank goblin and a D-rank hobgoblin, with a stronger creature not usually appearing on the first floor. The fairies hurried to show their worth, and Lily started the conflict with a fairy bullet, turning herself into a projectile that pierced the goblin's head, ending him. Then it was Fairy's turn, who summoned a branch whip and struck the hobgoblin squarely, impressing her companions. At the same time, Tama noted that the fairies possessed excellent mid-range attacks, making them a valuable asset to the group's tactics. Despite their effortless victory, a distant roar echoed from the depths of the dungeon. Vulcan suspected it was a minotaur, though Area found it unlikely that a C-rank monster would appear on such a low-level floor. Surprisingly, Stella interpreted the roar as one filled with despair. Deep within the labyrinth, and a rank troll was feasting on the creatures it had slain along its path, including the very minotaur the group had assumed would be their opponent. As they advanced undetected, they soon uncovered the source of that terrified scream. Amid this, Area asked them to stay back as she wanted to test how much she had evolved since their last battles. Lily and Fairy moved forward to set up an ambush, and Lily began with a fairy bullet, but the projectile failed to penetrate the troll's tough skin. Similarly, Fairy repeated the branch whip and even opened a wound on the monster, but it regenerated instantly and noticed the attackers quickly. The giant swung its club, but Stellar rushed in, blocking the impact with her shield. At the same time, Vulcan slammed her hammer against the troll's foot, sending a wave of pain through its body. Area then used her acceleration to close the distance, landing multiple precise cuts on the target. Seizing the opportunity, Stella directed Lily to aim for the enemy's eye, and the fairy did exactly that, successfully breaking its guard. Stella quickly lunged forward, driving her sword deep into the troll's chest, but despite the severe wound, the creature refused to fall. Noticing that their opponent was on the verge of defeat, Vulcan urged Area to deliver the final blow. Without hesitation, Area unleashed a holy blade combined with triple strike, cutting down the foe for good. With the battle won, Stella, who had always preferred to act alone, admitted that teamwork was actually quite enjoyable. Meanwhile, Area declared that it was time to head back and report everything to Arnold. Meanwhile, in Clariel, the royal capital, a kingdom scout rushed to inform the king that their greatest fear had come true. Monsters across the land were becoming more agitated, as if drawn by demons, and there was no time to lose in addressing the looming threat. At that very moment, an elf who bore an uncanny resemblance to Area told a soldier in the capital that the time had finally come.